Shane, Chris mentioned open competition at quarterback. How do you view that with Anthony going to year 3?
Yeah, I think it's good. I think competition's great for everybody. Anytime you got competition at any position, whether it's the quarterback position or wherever it may be, I think that makes everybody better.
What do you need to see from him going into year 3?
I think consistency is the biggest thing. You know, we've had those conversations, myself and him, just being consistent. Obviously, he's being on the field. 15 games the last 2 years. He played 11 last year, did some really good things, but just looking for the consistency.
Right now he's working with Tom House down in Florida.
Who's that?
Tom House.
Okay.
I guess, what do you want this offseason to look like from him, just in terms of building toward the regular season?
Yeah, I think, building on the fundamentals and obviously just continue to work on his passing, getting the completion percentage up will be big going forward for him.
When you look at the completion percentage, is that footwork? Is it playing the position? What is it for him?
Yeah, I think it's repetitions. I think it's you look at those things, just repetitions going over and over again is going to be big for him. The fundamental part of it, I think he has really quick feet. I've said that before, really quick feet, and I think it's just getting the repetitions with those guys to get that completion percentage up.
You got Lou in-house now.
Yeah.
How much did your history going against him factor into you wanting to look into bringing him in?
A lot. A lot of the guys that I interviewed had a ton of respect for all those guys and the scheme that they ran. And so when I was going through that process, I was looking at schematically, what teams do, what has given, myself that I've been where I've been fits. And he's one of those guys that I got a lot of respect for. He's multiple in the back end, tight coverage, press man stuff, which, will be good for us, a good switch up for us. Excited, to have him on our staff. And with that being said, got a ton of respect for Gus and what, he did here the last couple of years, but excited to add Lou and the rest of the assistants.
Is it as simple as being hard, or to simplify, is it being hard to read from a defensive coordinator for a play caller?
Yeah, I think, he does a good job of disguising certain things from a coverage standpoint, from a back end standpoint, when and where and how he brings his pressures. If you look at his history, the past 6 years as a D coordinator in Cincinnati, obviously 2 AFC Championships games, been to a Super Bowl. He's done a lot of really good things.
Shane, when looking at the possibility of taking a tight end early in the draft, how important is it for that player to be able to impact the run game as well as being a pass catcher if you're going to draft him that high? Yeah,
that's a good question. Depending on what route we go, obviously to be multiple at that position, to be able to run block and pass catch is huge. But obviously being able to affect the game on third downs as a pass catcher at the tight end position is huge. So as we're looking through all positions, we'll take that into consideration.
Shane, how do you feel about VR use in quarterback development? And some guys love it, some guys can't stand it.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think it's got a lot of benefits. We have it in our house. We use it. I think it's really good. It really is. It puts you in the game. I've done it, and it's pretty interesting. Obviously, you're not getting hit. You don't have pads on. But you can set your plays up and put your exact playbook on there versus certain defenses, and you can put yourself into the stadium. Like we're playing at Lucas Oil. It shows Lucas Oil Stadium, the guys you're going against. So to get those extra reps are huge. I think it's awesome.
Has AR used it?
Yeah, he used it. Yeah, it's great.
Shane, last year you guys had the smallest or one of the smallest staffs. What's your philosophy on how you construct your staffs, your assistants? How do you want to designate them, or
that's a great question. I think it depends, on what you're looking for from a staff standpoint. Obviously, you have your position coaches, and along that, you have assistants with your young assistants. I think as long as you hire assistants and young assistants, and you have a role for them, I think that's very beneficial. But if you're just going to hire guys and not have a role for them, I don't think that does you any good. So every person that we hire, we have a plan in place before we hire them and make sure their role is clearly defined.
You were an assistant before you became a head coach. How have you seen maybe the size of staffs grow? Is it a good thing that they continue to get bigger?
Yeah, it definitely has grown. I think some staffs are bigger than others. You go around and talk to other people. What's the benefit of having bigger staffs? And I think it's really what you're looking for and what you need. From that standpoint and what their role is going to be, like I said earlier. So I think that's the biggest thing, is understanding what the role is. And, hey, we might need someone to do this, and we don't have another hand for that. We need to hire this person to do that. And I think that's kind of how staffs continue to grow and get bigger.
Shane, with Lou, there's the system, but then there's also getting more out of individual players.
Do you think there's anything that he does that may be able to bring that out of some guys?
Yeah, I think, just going through the interview process and being with him the last couple of weeks, he's got great energy about him. And I think he'll be able to really connect with our players and use our players' strengths. I really do. And I think he did a hell of a job with that in Cincinnati. And, going through and looking at his game plans, the biggest thing, that I've seen over the years, he's always got a plan to take their best player away. And so you go into these big games or wherever it may be, he'll have a plan, to win the game for that.
DeForest Buckner made some comments late in the season about how he felt like ego, complacency with some of the issues on defense. Chris talked about changing the roster over to maybe add more competition. I guess from your standpoint as a coaching staff, what can you do to address that? And was that at all a factor in deciding on a defensive coordinator?
Yeah, I think, when those things happen during the season, you get comments like that. Obviously, when that stuff does happen in the season, we nip it in the bud quickly. But I think, you look at your roster and you look at competition, and adding competition is great. But to flip the whole roster over and change the whole roster, that's not realistic. So we're working through that. We're looking at free agency and we're looking at the draft.
Shane, the assistants that Lou hired, how much of a role did you play in that? What strikes you about those guys?
Yeah, I think anytime you hire either whether your offensive head coach, you hire a defensive guy, I think it's important that he has some guys that he feels comfortable with. So as we were going through that process, obviously he knew some of the guys we were bringing in. Obviously we interviewed them and just make sure it's the right fit. There's a lot of good coaches out there, but we want to make sure that we got the right fit so they can gel together and the chemistry is going to be good.
Chris Hewitt being in Baltimore as long as he was, what does that add? Because they're kind of their own defensive tree.
Yeah, I think, that Baltimore defense still today, obviously, is one of the best in the league. They've been doing it at a high level, and he's had that back end playing at a high level for a long time. So to be able to get him in our situation that we got him in, kind of worked out great, better for us. So really excited to add him to our staff.
Shane, you look back at last season, in what areas do you think you excelled as a coach? Other areas you're like, this is where I got to improve?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, we went through some adversity last year, and I've learned from that adversity. Obviously, the first year I was here, things went pretty good. Obviously, we didn't make the playoffs, but we hit a little bit of adversity. So you learn from that. So when those situations come up, if they ever do come up again, you're ready for those. But again, just being in that leadership role and being in those team meetings and being the leader of the football team and having a message every single week, I think I continue to grow in that area too.
Shane, there was a lot of conversation about culture throughout this past season. How are you looking to bolster that within your players through free agency, the draft, and this offseason?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think culture is about winning. You know what I mean? I think it comes down to winning a lot, but obviously you got to cultivate that culture with the players that you have in the locker room and the coaches leading the charge. So, you build that through the off season, you build that through spring, you get into training camp, and you really build your identity that way.
You've kept the same coaches around Anthony.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like the message needs to change from those coaches, or what do you feel like needs to happen there?
I think this, with a young quarterback, I think continuity is important at that position with a young guy. Obviously playing, 15 games in the NFL, hearing that, those same voices, I got a lot of, respect and confidence in Cam and Jim Bob and the work that they do. They're really good coaches. So to have another year with those voices in his ear, I think will be beneficial.
Is this a make or break year for Anthony? Like, knowing it's an open competition, going into year 3, like.
I think every year is like that in the NFL. You know what I mean? You got to show up and play. You know what I mean? Every year it's pressure situations, and you got to show up week in and week out and put on your best performance.
2 years ago, you guys had a lot of success in the run game, having Zach Moss back there and being able to have somebody to take some of the pressure off Taylor's plate. That wasn't as much of an emphasis this past year. Is that something that going into this offseason you guys would like to find a way to replicate, or is what we saw last year?
I think obviously Jonathan Taylor, as we know, is a really good player. He's our bell cow, and to add pieces behind that, obviously we'll look into that, to add some guys there, and then we'll go from there. But I thought, he ran it well this year. I think we finished 8th in rushing this year, but to add some more pieces behind him will be big.
Would you like to have like a Joker type pass catching back?
What's a Joker?
It's it's like Sean Payton uses Travaris Cadet, those guys, those kind of like pass catching guys.
Okay, Joker. All right, this is a new one. All right, I like it. I think there's benefits to that for sure. I think you got maybe your short yardage back, but you also get your pass catching back out of the backfield. And obviously, when you look through that, whether it's free agency or the draft, you got to make sure, like with any guy that you bring in, you got to have a plan on how you want to use him.
Coach, last night the Night of Champions was
Tony Dungy was there. Colts fans love to see him. What do you appreciate about him, and how does that influence your career?
You know what? I got a ton of respect for him. I've had, multiple conversations over the past couple of years with Tony. The work that he's done, the human that he is, the humility that he has, you can just see it. I saw a few things, this morning, just looking at some of the clips from last night, just how much the players loved him, and they just wanted to play hard for him. So a ton of respect for him, and, got a really good relationship with Tony.
All right, thanks. Shane, since you've gotten here, tight end room's been kind of a committee approach. When you're in Philly, you're kind of like one lead guy. What are the advantages to having maybe like a go-to top flight pass catcher that position?
I think I mentioned a little bit earlier, I like our tight end room right now, but, when you have, a guy like an elite guy that, can be dominant on third down, I think that really helps your football team.
Chris mentioned the end of your middle of the field needed to be better offensively. Do you kind of look at that?
The middle of the field?
Yeah, Chris said that you guys need to be better in the middle of the field offensively. Do you kind of view that as tight end, as an area?
Yeah, that could definitely help. Obviously, tight ends, you throw them over the middle. Obviously, you can throw them sail routes and stuff. But yeah, those tight ends over the middle can definitely help.
How do you think Anthony's handled the offseason, obviously now with it being quote-unquote open competition?
Yeah, I think he's been great. We had those conversations at the end of the year about it, and he was great with it. And he's working his tail off right now, down in Florida, getting better, working on the fundamentals. So I'm excited to get him back in April.
What are the biggest strides you want to see from him with another full off season?
I think the biggest thing, going into year 3 is just continue to take that next step, just being that leader, as a quarterback in that room. And then obviously the fundamentals, the details, and we talked about just getting that completion percentage up and just taking those easy completions as we go.
Jim, the passing offense, how can the different skill sets of Pitt, Josh, and Alec maybe kind of grow in concert again in 2025?
Well, all 3 of them had over 800 yards, which was pretty impressive. And I think that continuity with those 3 guys, and those guys continue to work and getting the reps, will be huge. You know what I mean? I mean, a lot of those guys are going. Josh going into year 3. Alex taking another step. Obviously, AD. Getting AD into year 2. Ultimately talented player. That we're excited for in year 2. And then Pittman, obviously, what he's been doing has been phenomenal. So I'm excited for all those guys.
I know you're so limited on what you can do. Get contact with players now.
Yeah.
Off season opens April
21st.
Okay.
Yeah, April 21st.
Shane, there are some young coaches that as they get into their, first tenure, if you will, they stop calling plays after a period of time. Is that something you've thought about at all?
No, right now I continue to call the plays right now.
I guess why not?
Why not? I feel like, that's kind of what got me the job in the first place, and I don't want to lose that. So right now, that's where it's at.
I know you mentioned wanting to get better at leadership. I know over in the offseason, you talked to a lot of different head coaches.
Yeah,
Who are
absolutely.
some of the best leaders you think that you've been around?
Well, the head coaches that I've been around, I got a lot of respect. As you heard me say this when I got hired, is Norv Turner. I got a ton of respect for him and the leadership. He was a 3-time NFL head coach, and just the way he respected the room when he walked in there. Obviously, and the offensive mind that he had instant credibility with those guys. And I think it comes down to a lot of times is having success too. When you build that success and you build that rapport, and you win a lot of football games with your guys, you build that credibility, along the way.
Shay, you mentioned at the end of the season, you felt like the team was close.
Yeah.
Chris Ballard came out a couple days later, we're not close.
Yeah.
Obviously, probably semantics, but just how have you all talked about where the state of the team is right now versus where you can go?
Yeah, I think here's right. When I say we're close, and we're close to making the playoffs. You know what I mean? I mean, first year we were a play away. Last year we're a game or 2 away to where we need to find that. Whatever it may be, we're going into year 3. I'm going into year 3. It's taking that next step and just getting over that hump. And just once you get in, you never know what can happen in the playoffs. So I think we got to do a great job of continuing to build, this off season. Looking at a lot of different things on how we do things, how we do training camp, how I do the off season, all those semantics that go into it, so we can get over the hump.
Shane, have you changed on how you, sort of lean on some of these veterans, guys like Kenny Moore, DeForest Buckner, after the comments last year, just in an off-season like this?
Yeah, absolutely. We have, when the season ends, I meet with every player in my office, and, I kind of get their, thoughts on the season and how it went, and I give them my thoughts, and, we go from there. But those veteran leaders in our locker room, I think that's huge. I think some of the best teams that I've been on, that player-led locker room is huge, to success. And so when you got guys like that, really good leaders, they're going to hold guys accountable in that locker room, when the coaches aren't around. I think that goes a long way.
Was there a general theme that came up from those off-season meetings with the players?
I just think with anything, right? When you don't make the playoffs, right? Everyone's frustrated because that's the ultimate. The ultimate goal is to win the Super Bowl, but you want to get in and give yourself a chance. So when you fall a little short, there is frustration there, obviously with everybody. But obviously we're trying to take the next step so we don't, let that happen.
And you said
Last one.
that you learned from the adversity in the season last year. I guess what specifically did you walk away from and think I should have been better here? If this happens again, I would do this.
Yeah, for me to say that right now, I think just there were some things that happened throughout the season. You know what I mean? Obviously, with some of the things that went on that you guys know about that I'm not going to bring up again. But obviously, you learn from those, and so it's like, shoot, for me as a leader, just setting the standard even more clear. You know what I mean? Is reiterating the standard over and over again, and not saying it at the start of training camp and saying it at the start of the season, but it's a reminder. Hey, every 2 weeks of this is the standard, and this is how we operate.
So more behind the scenes, less public facing.
Correct.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thanks, Coach.